There's a scene, I might be going way off topic here, but there's a scene at the very end of the movie Moana, which is a Disney movie. It's a
Yeah,
great Disney
so
movie
familiar.
where she confronts the demon, this Taka or whatever her name is, and it's this volcanic
Yeah.
fire monster, and she says, "Let her come to me," and she walks towards this beast, and she's so loving, and she says, "I see you, I know who you are." And the beast transforms before her into like a goddess, right? Because she sees her, and so I just think it's such a touching scene in the movie, and I think it's one that I think that's really what so much of this work in psychology and addiction, as it pertains to you and your show, is about.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Willpower podcast. Today, I have Tiff Thompson here with me. PhD in neuroscience, marriage and family therapist, neurotherapy expert, CEO of School of Neurotherapy. She's all about healing families hit by addiction with real compassion and honest wisdom. I've been in that transplant bed, the guilt, the family fallout. So we're talking straight today. If you're dealing with addiction tearing your family apart, or you're the one watching someone who you love spiral, stay with us. Tiff, thanks so much for jumping on. Let's dive in.
Right on. Yeah.
Take me back to your early work. What got you into neurotherapy and families recovery?
Yeah, this was actually a backup career. It wasn't my plan at all. I was a corporate, my first career was a corporate career, and I was doing pretty well. And I was building wind energy farms, which I was very proud of. And then I basically got bit by the bug of neurotherapy. I came across it on a vacation and had to do it. It was kind of like falling in love, like being married and falling in love. That's the analogy that I use. And so my early days were pretty humble. I went from being somebody of some sort of professional status to really being nobody, and working, as an intern for a psychologist in a stinky little, office in Goleta, California. And I thought, what have I done to my life? And now, because I've chosen this path, that I've met my husband, and I couldn't be happier in this career.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. You've been open about shifting from tough love to compassion. What made you see that blame and shame don't work?
Yeah, I mean, have they ever really worked? Because when you're blaming and shaming, you're pushing against something, right? Whether we're doing that with ourselves or whether we're
Mm,
doing that with somebody else, what we do is we create a resistance against the thing that we're pointing our finger at. And it's a me versus you, or if it's one person, it's a me versus me. And feeling bad about what you've done or feeling bad about who you are. And so, in my opinion, really the only way, gosh, that's a big statement, but I'm going to go with it. The only way really to begin to integrate and evolve is to allow, right, for the less savory parts of ourselves to be, like to first simply witness them
mm.
and say, wow, okay, so this is. Right? Start there. I accept that this is what it is, right? And then from there we can move forward. So as opposed to pushing against it and creating a resistance to it, we're actually allowing for it to, kind of fall into our arms, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking back my own recovery here, and it's just admitting it, meeting people where they are, knowing I can relating to them at that level. It's so meaningful.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. There's a scene, I might be going way off topic here, but there's a scene at the very end of the movie Moana, which is a
Mm,
Disney movie. It's a
yeah,
great Disney
so
movie
familiar.
where she confronts the demon, this Taka or whatever her name is, and it's this volcanic
Yeah.
fire monster, and she says, "Let her come to me." And she walks towards this beast, and she's so loving, and she says, "I see you, I know who you are." and the beast transforms before her into like a goddess, right? Because she sees her, and so I just think it's such a touching scene in the movie, and I think it's one that kind of I think that's really what so much of this work in psychology and addiction, as it pertains to you and your show, is about.
Mm. And it's like it seems like our journey here on this planet is almost that is what it is to make mistakes and learn from your mistakes, but it's so difficult from us to learn from our mistakes unless it gets to the point of like rock bottom like it did for me. Now,
Mm.
in your opinion, where do you stand or where are you in that camp? Are you in like has to hit rock bottom for people to change, or people just are the way they are until circumstances meet them square in the face?
I've seen all of the above. I mean, I have a client who I can think of who was really in a bad binge cycle, and he didn't have to hit rock bottom, but he did have to get freaked out, which was basically coming to terms with the fact that you're gonna die, man. But he wasn't living in the gutter. He still had a job, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I think people can wake up to the reality of what's not working at any juncture in the journey. You know.
Switching gears a little bit, families often get told, wait for rock bottom.
Mm.
You say intervene early with empathy. Walk me through that. What does it look like in real life?
Well, everybody's gonna have a different, everybody's going to respond to a different tack, right? And so some people will need the tough love. Some people are going to need, more aggressive sort of intervention, process. But I'm really, at the outset, I'm really a fan of curiosity. Now, curiosity isn't going to cure an addict of his addiction, but it's also not going to shame him, and it's not going to push him or her
Mhm.
away, right? It's not going to otherize, and it's not going to ostracize. Again, we're coming back to that idea of allowing, and accepting. And I feel like that's a brilliant place to step in for some, but not all. Some people really need a slap in the face when it comes to addiction.
Yeah. In your experience, do you think it's more one or the other, or it's just a mixed bag?
I think it's different strokes for different folks, you know? Um, I, I think that everybody's going to respond to something a little bit more differently.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
So I lost my liver to alcohol. Shame was like one of the heaviest parts for me and my family.
Mm, mm.
How do you help families rebuild when addiction has wrecked your trust?
Gosh, that's such a good question. The nature of my work is foremost physiological, right? So the origin of, well, psychology and psychotherapy is beautiful and interesting. I have to be really straight with you when I say that I would not be a therapist. I would not be a mental health care practitioner if I didn't have teeth, if I didn't have the ability to change patterns with multimodal stimulation, which is what I'm doing, which is
Mhm.
we have a hardware software company, and we manufacture this stuff. And we're in inpatient and outpatient clinics. I do a lot of reporting for different recovery centers. My husband is the head of a neuroscience at a place called FHE Health in Florida, so we're really familiar with the addiction cycle.
Mm,
But I have to be honest with you when I say that, um, I like to address the physiology. I like to address the craving. We like to cut the craving. We like to go for the underlying genetic and phenotypical profiling that predisposes people to addiction, should that be the case. And then when it comes to the actual craving and the actual looping around craving, we want to target the regions that are the most um important or influential in that cycle, which is largely the nucleus accumbens, which is, you probably know about it. It's a little cluster of neurons, and it's deep within the subcortical regions of the front of the brain, the anterior portion of the brain. And it's a key element in the release of dopaminergic neurons, right? Dopaminergic
mhm.
neurotransmitters, not neurons. And so, in the process of having a craving, that's one of the things that's happening. And of course, as you also probably know, there's a great deal of pain in the experience of withdrawal. And so, one of the things that I work with addicts is the dampening of that withdrawal and the cutting of the craving, right? And so in working with families, it's more like I think what I'm really here to do is to restore the human that they know and love,
Hmm.
and then to allow the family unit to begin to regain the trust that they lost.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
'Cause it's so true. It's like you have to get the person back to who they were before you can start getting to why they got to that place,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and will they ever get there as well? I mean, that's not even the object. Like you are different. You will are different than the man who had his liver transplanted in 2023 or 2024. You're not the same Will. You're never gonna be that guy back there.
yeah, I think of that, but I'm still Will, but there's things that
Okay.
are definitely different. No, I'm with you on that. I mean, things are my life is completely different. What am I talking about? You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so that's a piece I think too, which is
You mentioned that the dopamine being a plus, and this is the part that always fascinated me that I just found out was like the negative deficit of it. So you're constantly getting the negative part of it as well to kind of get yourself
right.
back to baseline. So there's always that yin
Bingo.
yang of you're always in withdrawal or you in need. It's always just
That's
going
right.
on, and there's no
That's
way.
right.
Yeah. So the only way to
The
get
only
out of
thing
it.
is yeah, the only thing that this addiction is doing is it's scratching the itch that it created in the first place,
Ugh,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
And
way to describe it. That's a great
yeah.
way to describe it. Your approach uses excuse me. Your
Right.
approach uses neurotherapy to rewire brains. For someone like me, post-transplant, dealing with mental fog or trauma, how does that actually work?
Yeah, that's such a good question, right? So, if you were to walk into the doors of my clinic or any clinic that runs, neurofield equipment, um, if the transplant was still new, I would be curious to see if we could help your system, acclimate. But that's an aside. So, brain fog and trauma, um, different profiles for each, and this is where this gets exciting. Is that everybody has their own amalgam of patterning that makes them who they are, right? So
Mhm,
underneath your skull is the seminal text of your own narrative, right? And I believe everything that has occurred in your life is somewhere in that patterning, right? So the noise that's created by the brain is the most complex noise in the known universe, right? These electrical chemical potentials that we're making are it's the most complex noise in the known universe. It's more complex than AI, it's more complex than anything besides the universe itself, right?
mhm,
And so you will have a very unique signature for brain fog, but chances are it falls within, 8 or 10 buckets of potential ways in which it manifests, right? And then we combine with that a trauma profile. What's the trauma profile look like? And so just to kind of give you some languaging around it, you might have for brain fog a generalized theta, right? You might have excessive 4 to 8 hertz, which makes it difficult to focus, to concentrate, to think straight. And then the trauma profile, often we see what I call a short circuiting. We see the brain essentially shutting off sometimes the affective portions of the brain, meaning emotion, affect. So the
mhm,
anterior portions of the brain, the anterior cingulate. If you see an alpha gating or an alpha persistent there, it's a disengagement. Alpha is like an off. When your brain makes alpha, you're kind of not attuned. So this is where the magic of this work comes in, which is each profile is going to want something different, right? It's almost like, it's like a body type. Like it's this body type is going to look better in these types of clothes in this fit, right? And so depending on the profile, I would choose different what's called a montage, different placements of electrodes. I would work with different modalities of neurostimulation, and I'd work with light therapy as well. And I would, within 10 sessions, begin to alter your patterning, get another set of data after 10 sessions, which is watching your brain under task and then watching your brain at rest,
Mhm.
and quantifying it and see how far we've come. And for most people, it's usually a 20 to 30 session endeavor.
Yeah. In your experience, have you noticed that people post-transplant life, that you've come into maybe in personal life, professional,
Hmm.
that do have this neuropathy issue, having issues just n being able, like, forgetful? Like, I just noticed that my thought patterns are a lot more sporadic. It's hard for me to finish where I got a tangent that I'm going on and knowing where the
Hmm.
through line is, things like that. It's much more common these days, and I'm wondering if you have any kind of stance or any maybe knowledge that I might not know of when it comes to that.
Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about, chances are good, Will, and I don't know your whole health history, and I know that this isn't really about you, but we're going to use
Right.
you as an example anyway.
It's just, well, because
Um,
it's a common question I get asked
right.
because a lot of people
Yeah.
have the same question
w-
that I have,
we're
so
t- we're talking foremost about wear and tear on the system, right? I mean, that's really, if we wanted to kind of boil this down, and we're talking about, you could call it a head injury. That's kind of extreme terminology, but we're talking about the consequence of going under general anesthesia time after time. We're talking about, the laboring that your brain has had to go through by being hammered by, alcohol again and again and again, what that did to the dopaminergic production. So there's a whole cascade of events that's
Mhm.
created the profile that you're working with right now, and yours is going to be a little bit different than his or than hers. But when we're talking about transplants, and particularly addiction related transplants, the system has probably got some degree of uh, you know hypoxic damage, depending on if there was ever an overdose, right? If they were ever deprived of oxygen, maybe chronic exposure to alcohol can cause something called Wernicke-Korsakoff's aphasia. So we can see like premature age-related cognitive decline findings in the data. Um, and then again, sort of this general anesthesia thing and going under. Now,
Mhm.
now the upside of this, because that's also doom and gloom, right?
Uh-huh.
That's just a big bummer. The upside of this is that your system is absolutely 100% capable of recuperation. 100%.
Really?
But the
I
downside
got
of this is that it's medication is not going to be the thing that fixes it, and it's not going to be like physical therapy. It's not like you just need to go on more jogs, and we're not going to operate on your brain, right? Which is why this modality, it's very novel. It's still novel. It's out there, but not that many people are practicing clinically applied neurostimulation. But this is a model, Will, that I would ask that you give 20 hours of your life to, and see if
Yeah,
we
what is
can
it?
get you clearly thinking again,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Totally. Like the types of symptomology that you've just mentioned is some of my favorite stuff to work on. It's not like you have some big gaping wound. It's not like there's a lesion or an infarct or something really creepy. We're talking about wear and tear. We're talking about a system and
It
then there's a path of least resistance. So your brain is used to doing this thing because that's how it's kind of like recuperated. And that's what you're experiencing in the
You
brain
wanna hear
fog.
something that I've been muddling with over the past couple days is that
Yes.
I'm 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 being torn apart. I'm being torn apart in this, and I would love your perspective here. So my past self is this low version of me. So it's like the alcoholic Will, right? The unreliable Will, the one who doesn't pick up the phone, the one who does this, the one who always does the wrong
Mm,
decision instead of the right decision, being held back. And then there's like my higher self. It's almost like the ego, super ego kind of thing. But my higher
mhm,
self is pulling me up towards this direction. Yet I'm constantly in a dilemma with myself, trying to get back, like trying to get back into what's the familiar self of the chaos and the alcoholism and like
mm,
like I'm being drawn
mhm.
back into that version.
Well, so there's probably a chance that there's a developmental aspect involved as well.
Hmm.
Just the way that you've asked that question, and I don't know your developmental history, but I will speak to your larger audience around this, which is that we learn our natural default patterning, which is controlled by a cluster of nodes in the brain called the default mode network, right? So we form our natural default mode of operating
Mhm.
based upon what we are brought up in, right? Based upon early life. And again, I'm talking to not you, but more people here, which is, chances are better that you're going to suffer from an addictive issue if you had some developmental trauma growing up. If
Right,
you were abused, if you were molested, if you were neglected, if you were, your parents were addicts, if they went to jail, so on and so forth, right?
right, right.
So if you grew up in a chaotic household, for instance, where there was just, that was a piece of it, like that was just natural. That is your default mode. That is FAM familiar and FAM family. And that is the modus operandi that we seek to get ourselves back to, which is why people who have been raised in, challenging environments, they're going to seek out partners that match that patterning as well. They're going to pursue risky endeavors like shoplifting or maybe even prostitution or anything that's going to give them that thrill that makes them feel normal and makes them feel alive. And they're going to feel more itchy in kind of the mundane vanilla Martha Stewart kind of like, wait a second, this isn't quite right. I feel like I'm an imposter. I'm not really real. Right. So that's one short answer to the question, which is like it's possible that the fundamental conditioning of who you are is tied to a model that doesn't really work functionally.
Yeah, I mean, be thyself, yes, in a way. I'm hearing
Y-
that in there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, and so it is, right? It taught some like this. It just is what it is. But
Yeah.
that's interesting, and I won't turn the tables on you because you're the host. But you've said
No,
some things that
please
make me really
turn it all you
curious.
want. I mean, this is what I love to
Yeah.
do. I love just
Oh,
discourse. I love talking with people
yeah. Well,
who understand this kind of thing.
so this is an interesting thing, like this being torn, this two parts, right? I mean, I want to understand it a little bit better, actually, like how
Yeah,
you experience
it's
it and what the parts are.
exactly. That's what's so hard for me to explain. It's like I find myself trying to navigate my way back into familiar old habits that aren't serving me anymore or aren't on my best in my best interest. And
Mhm.
in the whole of that, like the gravity, the weight of it is so heavy, and the influence is so
Mhm.
strong that like I'll notice myself through acts of mindfulness and things like that. Practice help with that, but doing that kind of stuff, it makes me aware, like, oh, why am I doing that? Like, why is that? But why does it keep pulling me back all the time? Like, what is that? Why is that like, why is my brain not rewiring itself? It's been 3 years now. I'm sober. It's like, come
Mhm.
on, like, let's go, hurry up already. Like, when am I gonna have to stop
Mhm.
feeling so shameful and guilty? Like, it just takes a lot of time and a
Mm.
lot of patience, and it's an exhausting ride, and you wonder, "Why am I doing all this?" And a lot of people do that on my channel. They wonder that question, "Why am I staying sober? Is life better that way?" Like,
Is life better
you
that
know?
way? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah, it's a good existential question too.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Well, there's two pieces, right? I mean, one, I would say, um, one is that there is still an underlying physiology. There are paths of least resistance, right? We are prone to repeat the things that we know. I mean, literally in terms of the way that our brains are firing. Um, so there's old patterns there, and that's where this brain stimulation stuff is really super handy because that's the whole jam of it. But then the other side of it, which is a little bit more interesting, a little bit more existential, a little bit more Jungian, is these two sides. They sound to me like they're two sides of a coin, right? We have what's called the tension of the opposites, right? And the tension of the opposites is in play in everything expressed until you collapse those opposites into a unity, into a singularity. And at that point, then there is no longer either. Then, the super ego, morally conscious Will who does it right and has the podcast and is a good boy and, goes to bed at 9 p.m. and meditates and all that stuff. That isn't important anymore either. Like the lure of the super ego also diminishes in its strength. So those two things are at an equal opposite tension, one to the other. And, everybody I think can understand, or most of us, why Yeah, like, who doesn't want to feel altered, you know? How nice would it be to sneak off and do something bad, right? There's that shadow side, and right now for you, that shadow side is very much in the shadows still.
Hmm.
I mean, it used to be in the light, but now it's in the shadows, and things getting expressed in your g willness is the good guy, right? The good boy, the one that's doing it all right, and so it takes us all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, which is which is, um which is probably something that you know, it's best to do in company, but you can also do it with yourself, which is to, like, invite in this, like, despicable side of you, right? First, imagine that part of you is, like as, like, a little kid, like a little if you want, like, a dirty little kid, you know, a kid that's nobody loves or that represents some of the stuff that you've been through. And imagine him sitting in the corner and imagine, you know, your judgment of yourself being your judgment of this aspect of you, you know. And I don't know many people in their right mind who could actually shove a child into a corner and chastise him and wag a finger at him and tell him how horrible and how bad he is. And what's happening when we do that, and what's happening when you degrade and, you know, dehumanize that old version of you is you create a stronger tension between the two.
Hmm.
You further embolden the edified, you know, version of you that is the goodwill. He's the ego, you know, the super ego in this case is all stronger. But then this other side of you, which is in the shadows, which doesn't get to be expressed, is also emboldened, right? What you push into the dark calls you into the dark, right? So
Yeah.
this is all about integration and, you know, weeping for yourself and weeping for him and reintegrating him because it's all part of this process, you know?
Weeping, interesting word choice. Yeah, I do frame it that way, and it's almost a sense of grieving in a way because it was such a huge attachment to my identity, my personality type. It was who I associated myself with. I didn't know who I was without alcohol in my system. So shifting into a person who's sober was really it's still very complicated and tricky, and it's very
Yeah,
difficult to find the identity of who what the essence of what makes me me. It's hard.
right.
It's hard work. It's hard work. Um, so you got the PhD, the certifications, LMFT, BCN, QEE, GDL. What's the one thing science taught you about addiction that changed how you help families?
What has science taught me about addiction? I mean, more than anything, the profiling of it, you know, and what it's actually doing to our systems neurochemically, why it's all the harder to quit something when you're further down the rabbit hole. In the case of alcohol, you know, one of the things that happens is the exhaustion of the dopaminergic projection system. So listen to this. This is a little tidbit. See if you can hang on to this one. The
Okay.
profile that's most predisposed to alcoholism is roughly 11.6% of individuals, meaning 1 out of every 10 roughly has this profile. The profile is called a low voltage profile, but it's a profile that wants more GABA than it makes. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So you know neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, you know, GABA
Oxytocin.
is one that's one of the fundamental inhibitory, which means it's a chill pill. It's a chill neurotransmitter. The brain of a addict, the profile that's predisposed to addiction, naturally needs more GABA because you have what's called excess GABA A receptor sites. There's actually a mutation on the fourth gene for this particular profile. You need more GABA than you make. So you're actually out of balance at the get,
Hmm.
right? And interestingly, this is also the profile that is more tolerant of alcohol, can drink more alcohol, right? And it's a profile that is more predisposed to anxiety disorders than other profiles. So if you are an alcoholic and you have anxiety, you are 10 times more likely to have this profile than the average bear. It's just a naturally occurring genetic profile. It's not an abnormality, just natural.
So there is scientific clinical data that backs up the research that says if I did have a biological predisposition because of my father's drinking and his father's drinking and so on and so forth, there actually is some kind of truth in that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's genetic profile that backs this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I
There's
knew
all
like
kinds of profiles. The next one is a fast alpha. So some people, it's like their minds go so fast that, uh, yeah, that they actually need it to chill. Yeah.
that sounds a lot like me. I
So
keep
that
tying it
might
back to me,
be
which sounds super selfish. I know this is my podcast, whatever, but no, but it really does sound
all
like
the
me.
more.
So much noise in my head, so much noise in my head. Oh my god, oh my god. So I
Yeah,
just to
yeah,
calm it down, just to calm it down, it just felt so
yeah,
like I was going back to baseline. I could just be me. I could just be in my own skin and not be edgy about it. Like I always felt like
right?
I was wearing a suit that didn't fit right. Like my whole life just drove me crazy. But with booze, it felt
Yeah.
great. But I didn't care how it felt. You know what I mean? That's what it felt. That's what
Mhm.
it felt.
Mhm.
All right, last
Yeah.
question. So you're a CEO of School of Neurotherapy. What's a simple tool from your world that anyone can use at home to start healing?
Hmm. I mean, if we're talking about addiction, which I'm sure we are,
Hmm.
what I would say is, and people that are listening to your podcast, they probably have an idea that they're like out enough that they can listen to a podcast about addiction. Um, but the very, very, very first thing to do is to simply see yourself as you are, right? As opposed to shucking and jiving and negotiating and, bargaining and saying, well, I only had 4 drinks yesterday and that means I can drink more today and like all that shit. Excuse my language.
No, please.
I would say get real with yourself. Like be real with you. Like just start there and start to talk about it to any trustworthy individual who you think has the capacity to hold this incredibly sacred, personal, vulnerable information, right? Because also, the more we talk about this stuff, we start to let it out of the closet, right? We start to get it some oxygen, right? That
Hmm.
thing that we pushed into the dark, we start to call it back into the light and we begin to sort of reintegrate that lost part of ourselves.
That's that's a beautiful way to end it. So thank you so much. This has been awesome. Just a great conversation. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we jump off the pod right now?
No, I just want to thank you for your candor. I think that's awesome. I really do. Like, I think that that's the healing stuff that I'm talking about. So I'm really glad that you're an
Yeah.
example of that.
I think vulnerability is the way to connection, right? I mean, that's what they say at least, and I feel that. And I'm sorry, my dog's barking in the background. Of course, I think it just means it's time to go. But yeah, I really do think that vulnerability is at the center of connection. So I try to embrace it these days instead of hiding from it.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thanks, Will. Appreciate
yeah.
it.
Is there any kind of like socials or anything you want to plug before we jump off?
Yeah, if people go to schoolofneurotherapy.com or my clinic is Neurofield Neurotherapy,
Hmm.
Neurofield. And from there, wherever you are in the world, chances are I can hook you up with someone that's practicing this modality. And if you want to come to Santa Barbara, that's where we are, and we see people from all over the world. So
Yeah, that'd be neat. That'd be really fun to go to the West Coast. I'm located right outside Boston, so that's where I am.
okay, I have somebody for you. Well, I'll tell you in a second.
Okay, great. All right, perfect. Well, thank you. Thank
Okay.
you so much for coming on the Willpower podcast, guys. I hope you liked this episode. If it was helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe and share it to someone that you thought of during this episode. That's the best way to share this knowledge is to just share it to a friend that you think might help. So thank you so much for being here and be on the lookout for many, many more episodes coming soon. Thank you so much.